None of the events that are happening in Europe currently have happened without a cause. I think Marine Le Pen said immediately after the Charlie Hebdo killings, none of this has happened by chance. There are a lot of people who bear a lot of responsibility for what is going on in Europe right now, and these people need to be held to account. And it's a combination, in my view, of both political analysts who kept saying that the thing to fear about is the growth of the right wing and a resurgent fascism. It's not thanks to Philip de Winter and Vlaams Belang that the Jewish population of Antwerp is currently under guard from Belgian paratroopers. It's the fact that Belgium has a huge Muslim population. I think Brussels has a 26% Muslim population. This is the cause why. And there are a lot of particularly left-wing political analysts who made a lot of money in a sort of anti-radicalization industry of saying that, no, the real thing to fear was the growth of the far right. At the same time, there were Muslim moderates who were saying things about Anjem Choudary. Whenever Anjem Choudary appeared on the TV, there would always be counterpointed by an Islamic apologist who said that, no, this man doesn't speak for Islam. He's got nothing to do with Islam and Muslims. He doesn't speak for any Muslims. Well, he obviously does. He obviously speaks for those Muslims who are willing to kill and die for their faith, which is why he should have been listened to, and people like him should have been listened to for the past 14 years after 9/11, when something could have been done to prevent the terrorism that's likely going to follow in the year.
What has been the tipping point for you? At what point did you decide? I mean, the phrase you used earlier was "the die has been cast."
I think. Well, to take a specific look at some of the measures that the government is taking currently to try and deal with this problem, and it is all very much from country to country, bolting the stable door after the horse has already left. So the government is bringing in a counter-terrorism and security bill that limits freedom of speech, that seeks to take away passports if you're just merely suspected of having some kind of association with terrorism. And this goes for foreign passport holders as well. Now, these measures, they don't take account of the fact that there is something within Islam that justifies the commission of killing for those who aren't Muslim, for those who have different beliefs. And we almost live in a sort of never land now, where precisely because of this fearfulness that I've pointed to earlier, politicians like to maintain that there's two types of Islam. There's the Islam that happens in the Muslim world, where as a result of a cartoon drawn by leftist atheists in France, I think 42 churches were burned down at the weekend in Niger. And there's somehow this sort of Western Islam. This isn't to say that Islam isn't compatible. It is to say that there are certain things within Islamic ethics that justify killing people from having different beliefs. And there's been a reluctance to say that if you believe in the 5 words in chapter 2, verse 191 or 217, that say that idolatry is worse than carnage, that say that persecution by having freedom of conscience is worse than killing, then you're not an equal and relevant part of Western society. You're in fact a colonist. You're in fact someone who has exactly the same opinions and intentions towards 21st century Europe as, bluntly, Europeans had towards the Americas in the 17th and 18th century. And this is a reality that we are forced to live with. Somewhere, at some kind of decision-making process, it has been decided up on high that my continent and the rights and freedoms that uniquely evolved here over 3,000 years are somehow in the stage at which Islam should be allowed the freedom to moderate. But it's clear that there are certain theological obstacles that prevent Muslims themselves from tackling these issues. In fact, if they try to do so, it opens themselves up to the threats from takfiris, those who believe that unbelief is something that you can commit murder against, you can kill because of unbelief. It opens themselves up to the same threat. So we have a succession since 9/11, and specifically in this country, according to the PREVENT strategy, which this new bill basically codifies and says school workers and health workers can be prosecuted for contempt of court and put in prison if they don't apply. That what we need to be doing is reaching out to moderates and allowing Islam and Muslims to reform their own faith. Well, it's 14 years since 9/11 now, and we've been going on this particular route of just eroding our freedoms, eroding our freedoms, eroding our freedoms. And the orgia from the Islamic stable, the unwillingness of Muslims themselves to tackle those impetuses within their religion that justify murder, are leading to Europeans having their rights and their freedoms destroyed. And their governments who are unwilling to take the measures that could have actually tackled this, which are border controls, and speaking frankly, because parliamentarians are the only people who actually have the freedom not to be prosecuted for what they say anymore, because of their unwillingness to do these things, all our freedoms and all our safety has been eroded. But the one thing, again, politicians and academics have refused to do is accept that this word radicalization, this word extremism, they are essentially meaningless words. They mean nothing whatsoever. All they mean is the possession of dangerous ideas. If you're not willing to say what these dangerous ideas are, then these measures can only be applied by taking everyone's rights away, regardless of what ideas they might be. And what we observe is that these measures are always used because it's just easier against people who criticize Islam rather than people who threaten death against those who criticize Islam. So to give you an example, Eric Pickles, yesterday, in response to the Charlie Hebdo massacre, wrote a letter, he's the community secretary in government, to the mosques in this country saying that, you know, maybe they should contribute more in rooting out extremism. Naturally, they were affronted, and the Muslim Council of Britain said, no, there was this implication that Muslims hold themselves apart. Well, hang on, don't Muslims do a great deal themselves to try and make themselves apart from British society by wearing burqas, by demanding different forms of food, by essentially being babies and saying that they don't want to live in societies where their beliefs are criticized? Well, this is the continent where criticism of religion was invented. No one informed the Muslim Council of Britain that this was the case. This information was new to them. But he said things like, Muslim values, Islamic values are British values. What? Female genital mutilation isn't a British value. Forcing a woman to wear a shroud isn't a British value. Saying that you don't share in free speech isn't a British value. He also said things like, the vitriol espoused by the English Defence League is as much of an affront to British values as the statement of preachers of hate. So in other words, getting drunk on lager and going somewhere and engaging in a football chant that says Muhammad was a paedophile is as bad as saying that people who disagree with you can have their heads sawn off and people who write cartoons can be machine gunned in half. I mean, he was criticised for essentially making a mealy-mouthed statement. I mean, there was a time when Her Majesty's government, in relation to a crisis, could at least be expected to write a strongly worded letter. What you're seeing here is actions by government that are trying to demonstrate in an election year that they are busy, that they are doing something to solve the problem. But there's very little evidence that curtailing opinion, say, has any effect on curtailing hate at all. There's a very good article in the Weekly Standard by Dr. Sam Schulman at the weekend, where he looks at Holocaust denial laws, and he indicates, and this is not to do with increase in Muslim populations, the figures discount that those countries that have had Holocaust denial laws like Germany and France, the number of people who deny the Holocaust has increased markedly more than they have in a country like in America that has the First Amendment. But people in government are so wedded to the idea that you can legislate the power of ideas out of existence. If you just make laws that ban opinion, that you can get rid of hate and you can get rid of the power of ideology and religious ideology to commit acts of mass murder and terrorism. And the evidence is that it does nothing of the kind.